was a girl named Sophia on the beach, overlooking the sea. The ocean in front of her was beautiful yet mysterious, and she wanted to explore the whole thing and understand everything about it for herself. But all she had was a seashell that she found. A big conch shell that could hold, at most, a pint of seawater. So she did what she could and tried to take and study the ocean by filling the seashell and inspecting all the little fish that were inside. But she couldn't do the whole thing. The ocean was too infinite, too big. And as the morning sun rose to midday to afternoon with no progress, with no understanding, she became frustrated. Her shadow formed by the sun was cast onto the sand, and Sophia eventually left to go home. But her shadow remained. The sun dried the wet sand everywhere on the beach, except where the shadow stood. And the shadow was in the shape of Sophia's frustration, her confusion about the ocean, her anxiety over her misunderstandings. And eventually, the shadow started to move. Over time, the shadow traveled across the dry beach, leaving sandcastles and footprints and marks where the sand didn't quite dry, in pursuit of studying the ocean, in frustration. It didn't remember Sophia. It didn't remember why Sophia was looking. All the shadow knew was that it needed to be complete.
The story of Sophia within greater Gnostic mythos is one of the most pivotal and striking pieces of a creation story. What's interesting is that the shadow has a name in the Valentinian tradition. She's called Achamoth, and her story might sound familiar if you've played through a certain desert region in Hoyoverse's flagship gacha game. Now, a bit of background on this. I've developed a methodology for analyzing influences in media, which I'm going to apply here. That is, you can basically split influence into 3 categories: aesthetic, symbolic, and structural. Think of it like clothes versus skeleton versus mind. The clothes are what you can see from the outside and what someone looks like. The skeleton is how they're built inside, what symbolism is embedded and how it comprises the character. But the mind decides how they act, how they behave, and how they actually act and relate to the rest of the world within the story. Keep this in mind for a little bit. A ton of different creators and theorists have spent ample time looking at the aesthetic and symbolic borrowings and influences from other systems of mythology, particularly Nahida in Zoroastrianism, Ganesha and Saraswati in Hinduism, and Khonsu in Egyptian mythos. There's been some amazing work covering the topic already, but I especially like the work of Alchemist Nyx on YouTube and NeoWolf993 on r/Genshin lore, as well as Abyss Site's theory on origin. Nahida's symbolism and aesthetic details have been thoroughly mapped to many different specific mythological deities. They do a great job at answering the question, who does Nahida draw her design inspiration from? And they do a really good job at answering what kind of clothes the metaphorical model is wearing and what kind of skeleton it has. But I'm asking a different question today, one about the mind, the structure, because the mind is where the real tragedy lies. We know that Nahida certainly combines influences from Anahita and Ganesha. As debated as it is, no one's arguing that the shared symbolism isn't there. The parallels are almost too overt to miss. But my question today is, how does Sophia and Achamoth slot into all of this? Nahida holds very minimal aesthetic Gnostic symbolism compared to Hindu and Zoroastrian. So what gives? I'm arguing something else today, something that I haven't seen across my research on a character. If Nahida is just Rukkhadevata reincarnated, then the sages were right to be disappointed. She would be a downgrade, a worse version of the better god. But if she's a different person with a different ontology, then the implications are huge. It means that she's being forced into a mold that she was never intended to fit, that she could never fit, the mold of being a new Rukkhadevata, and her relationship to Rukkhadevata is the same as Achamoth to Sophia. For those who aren't familiar with Nahida, she's the Dendro Archon, de jure ruler of Sumeru, and the god of wisdom. After the death and disappearance of her predecessor, Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, during the Cataclysm, Nahida was created from the purest branch of Irminsul, the primordial world tree of Tevat. However, when she was born, the sages were like, what the hell, this isn't Rukkhadevata, and basically locked her up in the sanctuary of Surasvana, where she's basically been completely physically isolated for 500 years, only having access to the outside world via the Akasha. The de facto rulership of Sumeru was then handed over to the sages who rule in her stead. She's also like a 4-year-old child who's actually 500 years old, so like, I guess, bro? Actually kind of horrifying. They kept a 4-year-old in captivity for that long. Moving on. I'm comparing Nahida to Achamoth, obviously, so I'll give a bit of background on her, too. This section is going to be a little bit terminology dense, but don't worry because you do not need to remember all of this. The Valentinian creation story is this big epic tragedy centering around a figure of Sophia, or wisdom. Now, the allegorical parable that I told at the beginning of the essay is my own retelling of a myth, so I'm going to retell the story for realsies this time, reconstructing from Irenaeus. Now, in the Valentinian cosmos, you have the idea of the deep, the allegorical ocean. Basically, this infinite transcendent god who emanates other beings in the realm of fullness. Sophia is the youngest of the emanated beings, and what she tries to do is she tries to understand the deep, to understand the infinite source of all things. But she can't, and out of that inability comes her emotions: anxiety, perplexity, frustration. That emotion is separated from Sophia and is personified into its own distinct being. This is Achamoth, or the lower Sophia. And when Sophia gets readmitted to the fullness, Achamoth is still stuck, isolated from it. The details of the pleroma and the ions aren't important for our purposes, but what matters is Sophia and what she left behind. I think you can see where we're going with this. If you remember anything at all from this section, it's that Achamoth is the incomplete shadow of Sophia that got separated from her. A bit of a detour first though, there's some terms I'd like to go over that'll make everything make sense. Now, bear with me for a bit, because this next section will definitely be going over terms and ideas that you gotta remember, but this is crucial for understanding why Nahida and Rukkhadevata aren't the same person. So, I'll use another analogy, one that gives me an excuse to go out and buy candy. I'd like you to literally bear with me. Alright, so let's say you have two red gummy bears. They're both red, they're both the same shape, they're both made of the same stuff, which is sugar and gelatin and coloring and other stuff that'll probably give me cancer in 50 years. Are the gummy bears the same? Yes, kind of. But these two instances of gummy bear are different. They're both red gummy bears and are made of the same stuff of red gummy bear, but they're two different red gummy bears. So if these pieces of candy had free will, they would be like two different persons, two different individuals, and two different hypostases. That's what hypostasis means, individuality, or an individual thing. Even though they share the same essence, they would be separate beings with separate wills, and ultimately different destinies. For example, this one I might eat. This one I might mix with a rockstar and chug before I finish writing the rest of the video. It's the fate of the red one. There's categories for this in ancient Aristotelian metaphysics. The person, or who, of a gummy bear is the hypostasis. The hypostasis is like, this is who a person or object is. But the essence, or what, of a gummy bear is the ousia. Not the Fontaine energy type, but the Aristotelian term. I'll actually pronounce it Greek style to differentiate. Ousia. The ousia is like, this is what a person or object is. This is how you can have one ousia, the essence of gummy bear, but have 100 instances of gummy bear, 100 different hypostases with different gummy bear free wills, and gummy bear destinies. Now, let's expand this. I don't have a tree on hand because I don't really go outside, but imagine taking a tree, cutting off a branch, and then replanting that branch until it becomes a sapling. The two trees are going to grow up to be different, but they have the same essence or ousia. They're the same species, they have the same genetic information, they might have the same leaf shape, but they're different trees, different hypostases. They're going to grow differently, even though their essences are the same. A bit of an aside, this language debate was one of the most important arguments in early Christianity, but it got so heated that Santa Claus punched a heretical bishop over it at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. That probably didn't happen, but Nicene, Constantinopolitan, and Chalcedonian theologies relied heavily on the distinction between ousia and hypostasis to describe the fundamental relationships between the persons of the Trinity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were described as consubstantial, same ousia, but distinct, different hypostases. And the relationship between them is that the Son proceeds from the Father, and the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, and, I do realize that I'm about to apply extremely theologically loaded language to an anime gacha game. Please bear with me for a bit. I'm not trying to argue that Nahida is the same as Jesus Christ, nor am I even calling Nicene Trinitarianism analogous to Genshin. But the early church found this language useful to describe the same conundrum that we face in-game. Let's start with the story of Achamoth. Achamoth and Sophia are arguably the same essence, the same ousia. Achamoth is like a branch that was cut from the bigger tree of Sophia. She's hypostasized, made her own person, and when she becomes personified and distinguished as a separate entity from Sophia with her own agency and choices and feelings and relationships, Achamoth is described as the emphasis of Sophia, the ideas or anxiety. She's also called the lower Sophia, or the Sophia outside of the pleroma. She's defined by this isolation, by this inferiority, while the higher Sophia is readmitted to the pleroma. Different hypostasis. The original is restored, but the remainder is left outside, isolated, diminished. Yes, but distinct. The shadow isn't the girl. Now, there's an idea that Nahida is merely a reverted or smaller version of Rukkhadevata. This stems from a voice line in King Deshret in The Three Magi, where Rukkhadevata is said to have reverted to a small child. The understandable conclusion is that that reversion refers to Nahida herself. That's actually wrong, though. That's referring to Rukkhadevata losing power before Nahida's creation. So what's actually going on in that relationship between Nahida and Rukha? The parallels between Achamoth and Nahida aren't just aesthetic or symbolic, though that certainly exists as described above. I think it's ultimately structural. In both cases, the original produces a remainder or leftover that shares its essence but becomes a separate person. Let me try and prove it. Nahida's case first. Rukkhadevata's remnant consciousness explicitly says to Nahida a few key lines.
因为你就是我，我就是你。Because you are me, and I am you.
This could mean anything, but first and foremost, it establishes that the two beings share a fundamental connection in identity. What that connection is yet is unclear. Is the remnant stating that they're united in person, or does it mean I am you in terms of shared essence? We don't know yet. So let's go deeper, right into the very next line.
Though we share the same nature, our fates are bound to be different. 你我的本质虽然相同，但命运一定会有所不同。
Rukha is clarifying her colloquial statement from earlier, the one which can be interpreted as equality in person, but here's the philosophical position. In the original Chinese text, the term bunzat is used to denote nature. Now, it has a few different translations: essence, nature, innate character, or intrinsic quality, but I'm interpreting this to mean essence. The annoying thing about cross-linguistic translation is that concepts don't really transfer well, but if we interpret this word, essence or bunzat, as analogous to ousia, then it establishes that, yes, Nahida and Rukha do indeed share a single essence. Bunzat is also used on Chinese Wikipedia as a translation of the Latin term essentia, which itself is a translation of ousia. My argument for separate hypostases is as follows. Nahida is a free agent. She's conscious and makes decisions and has her own feelings and has her own relationships. Sure, she's a deity, not a human, but she meets every criterion for personhood that matters here. She's a person. That much is obvious. Then what about Rukkhadevata's remnant consciousness? We see that the remnant is a remnant consciousness. Yes, she's not exactly the same as the original Rukkhadevata's consciousness. One could definitely assume that the remnant is like just a sophisticated memory or replaying system. But memories don't express desire. Memories don't say, I've looked forward to talking with you. Desire requires a desirer. The remnant is a person. Furthermore, she's framed in-game as Rukha herself, not a magical recording. Remnant though she may be, a diminished consciousness is still a consciousness, maybe just with less ability than it had before. The original wording, kanlautek yatsi yisek, literally translates to a sliver of remaining consciousness, not just implying a static memory or recording. More evidence? Fine. Take a look at this phrase, yatsek keidaiju. Yatsek means continuously or all along, meaning that it has been a continuous action that has been occurring. Keidai obviously means look forward to or await, the verb in question. But this key auxiliary particle, ju, denotes a continued action or state, meaning that it was happening in the past but is also happening right now. Meaning, ever since Nahida's creation, this consciousness has been actively looking forward to and desiring meeting Nahida. This almost certainly necessitates continuity with the original Rukkhadevata, even in a degraded form. One more phrase though. The real me has presumably died a long time ago. The specific term used here is 真正的我, meaning authentic self or actual self. Yes, the remnant is not the exact same as the original, by differentiating herself as the less authentic or less actual self, but the above continuity still holds. The remnant is arguably a diminished direct continuation. Like if you take an apple, cut it in half, and let that half rot. It's still going to be an apple, even if it's now gross instead of being a whole different thing. and the remnant actually interacts with Nahida. The remnant coexists with Nahida. You cannot have a single hypostasis, a single entity, interacting with itself as if it were interacting as two fully separate beings. I don't think that this is a dissociative identity situation. The game clearly presents them as ontologically distinct entities, not one fractured mind. Though of course a DID-specific lens could probably lead to some really fruitful analysis as well, since the metaphysics of Irminsul are metaphysically vague, to say the least. In any case, I don't actually see enough evidence for that reading the text, though I could be wrong. Regardless, these are two separate free agents. They are distinct persons interacting with each other. Nahida is not Rukkhadevata, and vice versa. So, we can safely establish two things. First, through the Bunza language, that Rukkhadevata and Nahida share an ousia. They're the same kind of being, they're both the Dendro Archon in essence, made of the same Irminsul ousia. Second, through the interaction and distinct agency, that they're two separate hypostases, two different persons with two different fates. They're the same what, and different who. This means that Nahida isn't a downgrade, but again, her own person. And it makes her story more tragic. If she's been told her whole life that she's been a disappointment for not being someone that she was never supposed to be, then her arc hits so much worse. Nahida couldn't live up to the ideal of Rukkhadevata, but the comparison is a category error. Nahida isn't Rukkha 2.0. She's not the rebirth of Rukkha, but she's Nahida. Nahida 1.0, if you will. Her own person with her own destiny and her own fate. And Rukkha specifically says,
But perhaps you may become an even greater Archon than I. I already see a determination in you that I didn't possess in my time, and the future that it leads you to will be yours alone.
Not, you're gonna become me, you're gonna be better than me. The original is telling the new branch to grow differently, to grow better. She actually has more potential, as Rukkha believes. It's just that she needs to grow into it without expecting to become Rukkha. But her self-image of inadequacy and the Academia's view of her is still a tragedy. Nahida was locked up, isolated from the outside world precisely because she couldn't yet fill the shoes that Rukkha did. Her power basically got used as networking infrastructure to run Sumeru's internet, all while they waited for Rukkha, the real Archon, to return. But she never would, because Nahida would never become her. But she's a different person. A sapling grown from a branch isn't going to be the original tree, and it's never supposed to be. Nahida as a character, Achamoth as a myth, these two aren't so unrelated. Both are understood as deficient wisdom figures. Both are remnants of originals, separated and distinct. For both these figures, which are understood to be lesser than or inferior to their originals, in weakened forms. And that drives the events of their respective plots. Achamoth with the creation of the Demiurge, Nahida's entire arc in replacing Rukkhadevata. And if we use this reading to interpret Nahida's character, then her arc becomes doubly tragic. Not only are the circumstances around her tragic, but the moral justification around them are disproven, and really is not a justification at all. If Nahida really is just Rukkhadevata 2.0, then maybe it was fair, but under this model, she is her own person, Nahida 1.0. And the erasure of Rukkhadevata's memory gives her a substrate to do this on. She's no longer bound by that mold, and is free to truly become her own person, disconnected from what others expect from Rukkha, because now, their only reference point is, and has always been, Nahida 1.0. There is, however, a threat to this understanding. Multiple, in fact. Both Genshin's story and the mythos contain elements that don't fit so neatly into this reading, namely the concept of samsara and the mechanism of Achamoth's creation. But that's a debate for another time. For now, Nahida is still the shadow on the beach. Okay, so that was a lot. I know it was a lot of new mythological concept and some unfamiliar terminology, but you made it. You're at the end. Now, again, my framework isn't bulletproof, and I'm planning to address the primary gaps and weaknesses that threaten its plausibility and fit. So if you're about to type in angry comments about, what about samsara? Don't worry, I'm gonna go over that in my next video on the topic. Save it for then. I've shot off a couple of emails to some Nahida theorists to see if they'd be down to interview, and make sure that my framework actually holds. I am also going to do a lot more work into Hindu and Buddhist metaphysics, since I understand that my Aristotelian Greek background is a bit overly Western, and not every concept transfers cleanly to a clearly South Asian coded region, But these are the tools that I have, and I'd like to see where the Hindu and Buddhist readings of samsara and consciousness might conflict with my framework. And in any case, Genshin is syncretic as hell. They're blending Greek, Gnostic, Hindu, Buddhist, Zoroastrian, and Chinese sources simultaneously. So I don't think that applying one lens invalidates the other lenses for other aspects. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you think there are other areas where my framework doesn't hold up, or if there are any additions that could strengthen it. If you think I'm wrong, and I mean actually wrong, not just you suck because you didn't glaze the Nahida reading, tell me in the comments. Best counter arguments will be addressed in the next video. I also still haven't played the game. Anyways, I'm September, and hopefully I will see you next time.